and it will go live right now as well.
All right, I guess, are we starting? I guess we're going. I guess we're going. All right, well, welcome. My name is Justine Evers, and this evening I am your host. I am super excited to be here and honored to moderate this amazing panel of human beings this evening. Today, just to remind everybody who's watching, you are joining us through Minority Veterans of America, and this panel is a part of Project Thrive, which is MVA's Economic Empowerment Initiative. I am very excited to be a part of this as the founder and president of the Paradigm Switch. I've been working to economically empower military spouses all throughout the world, and started out serving veterans and military spouses, but found that military spouses needed just a little bit of help in the space because all of you are doing such great work. So enough about me. I'd love to kick off with some brief introductions. We can always talk about ourselves better than others can talk about you. And I'd love to hear your lovely voice and get to know you. I'm going to go in the order of the screen, and I'd love to start with Bridget. If you can introduce who you are, what you're representing tonight, and maybe a fun fact about you so we can get to know you real quick.
Sure. Well, thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to be here with my esteemed colleagues and the guests who are listening via Facebook and online here at Zoom. My name is Bridget McCoy. I'm the CEO and founder of Women Veteran Social Justice Network. We have been an online community network for about 12 and a half, 13 years now. We started as a Facebook group to support women veteran in the process of filing for their claims, especially those who had experienced military sexual trauma. And we continue to branch out into advising and connecting other leaders in the community. And that brought us into other communities beyond the veteran space. So we are currently working in spaces with moral injury, entrepreneurship, starting, civic engagement and things of that nature. Probably a fun fact that people some people know, I'm an artist and a creative. I'm an innovator in various spaces. You can see some of my photography behind me. I actually spent 7 days in the Alaskan wild on an expedition in protest to drilling for oil in that area. So there's a lot of interesting things going on with me and as a person, but as a nonprofit leader, I do a lot of mentoring and advising community leaders. And so again, I'm very pleased to be here and thank you for the opportunity.
Awesome. I love it. Welcome, my fellow creator and innovator. I love that. And Stephanie.
Hi, good evening. Thank you for having me. I am representing the Pink Berets today. The Pink Berets is an organization that was founded to assist women who are struggling with invisible injuries, such as post-traumatic stress, military sexual trauma, and traumatic brain injury. And our sheer focus is providing holistic therapy with an approach that allows them to determine what their recovery and their healing looks like. And so we offer a range of services that are at no cost to anyone who is interested in participating. You will have to be a military woman or at least a first responder. And the reason we set it up this way was to be able to offer the women that didn't feel like there was enough resources out there for them, an opportunity to find a safe space to explore what their recovery could look like. And so we have a clinical team that allows these women to come in and help them determine and navigate what that looks like for them. A fun fact I would say is that I strive to be musically inclined. I have not achieved it yet, but my hope is that I can achieve playing the guitar. I have a few friends that do it. I love it, but I still need to. I still need to hit a home run there, and I have not. So that's a little fun fact about me. I don't really say a whole lot, but I'm also appreciative to be amongst my peers here as well, and honored to be a part of this evening.
Awesome. I love it so far. I'm teaching myself how to play the piano, and I'm not doing a very good job yet either. I'm in the very messy early stage of it. So we could talk offline about
Absolutely.
that. Awesome. And last but not least, we have Jeremy. I'd love to get to know you a little better as well.
Awesome. Thank you. It's great to be here. I'm going to start off with since we're talking music, I'm going to start off there because I have tried and failed so far in the recent years on 2 different instruments. I tried self-teaching on both the violin and the guitar. Neither went very well. I highly recommend finding someone to teach you, at least if you're like me. It didn't go well, but I also am striving to become more musically inclined. I love music, want to learn to play, but I think I need an instructor. That said, I'm the CEO of Iraq and Afghanistan Veterans of America. We are a nonprofit that's focused on empowering post 9/11 generation of veterans. A lot of the work that we do is primarily advocacy work. We do a lot of work in Washington, D.C., advancing legislation. Right now, our big focus is on toxic exposure, getting support for veterans who are exposed to toxic exposure. Lots of people hear about burn pits. That's a big part of it. Another part is continuing to advocate for women and minority veterans. We've been really pushing on this for several years now. Had a lot of success last year passing the Deborah Sampson Act, which expands VA care to women veterans. Still a lot to do on that, so that continues to be an area of focus. Another fun fact on me, I guess not on the music side, is that I came very close. I'm a Navy veteran. I should have mentioned that as well. Still in the Navy Reserves, but came very close to not joining the military and joining the Peace Corps instead. My parents met through the Peace Corps, so I grew up with lots and lots of stories about the Peace Corps. Was all the way down of literally about to sign on the dotted line to join the Peace Corps like my parents did, but then also had some thoughts about the military. And the Peace Corps doesn't have an age limit for joining, but the Navy did. So I joined the Navy and maybe still can get back to the Peace Corps at some point.
Awesome. I love all the musically inclined. There must be something about running a nonprofit that you need an outlet, which I'm sure we're going to get into that. And it makes my heart so happy that you guys are making time and finding time to do that, because we all know that this space has a lot of challenges, and we're going to get into those challenges. But before we do, I just feel like I owe it to you guys to tell you a little bit about me as well, because we're going to have a conversation and you don't know who I am, and I'm just here moderating as this host, and I think it's only fair. So I am a Navy veteran, military spouse as well. I worked in the transition space for over a decade, mainly in higher education. And then I sat out in the nonprofit space as one of the original OGs of Bunker Labs for a long time and built the entire West Coast as their executive director, and then set out to start my own nonprofit, the Paradigm Switch, which is still up and running, going through many different shifts and changes. But I'm also running my own for-profit company now in innovation and creativity. So a lot of intersections here within what we're doing, and I'm really excited to be here. And we all seem to be involved in some sort of art or music, which is wonderful. So I'm excited for this conversation. And to get it started, I think the first question that I wanted to ask that wasn't on the list, so don't be afraid. It's not anything that you can't answer or handle, but I kind of like to go rogue. But I'm just really curious on how you got where you are today, and what made you start the organizations that you're in. And Jeremy, what made you take on such a large role in an organization that's advocating, for so much? And I'd like to start with Stephanie, if that's okay, because the organization is very near dear to my heart as someone who has suffered from MST and is going through that recovery process right now. It's really difficult. And so the work that you're doing is really near and dear to my heart. And I know that by me speaking up gives others the courage to listen in a little bit closer. So how'd you find yourself in this organization?
Oh gosh, I have probably shared this story numerous times, but rightfully so. I think it's important that we're able to share what really brought us from inception to where we are today. And for me, it was really being in a place of defeat is what I typically start with. I was looking for help for myself. And when I could not find that help, I went back to the old adage of, if you build it, they will come, right? So for me, I kept running against roadblocks in terms of being able to find something that I felt really spoke to me and what I was searching for. And that was for some type of assistance, some type of know-how to navigate what I was struggling with, which was not readily visible to others, right? It was the invisible injury, it was internal. And so anytime I looked up organizations or I looked up the type of assistance they're providing, it was mainly an allocation of resources for women. So there was nothing really touching on if you're struggling with post-traumatic stress, if you're struggling with military sexual trauma, we can help you and identify it this way. I wasn't finding anything. And when I mean anything, I don't mean just in the state of Texas, I mean across the US. And so what I did find was people that were ready to say, I will help you in terms of peer-to-peer support, but also, do you need your bills paid for? Do you need us to help you find a place to stay? Do you need your electricity bill paid? So I felt like a lot of those things were putting the cart before the horse. And I really needed help with what I was struggling with mentally. And when I could not find that, or I found it in a space that was really just for men, then I started to really do a soul search, if you will, and find what I needed to do and what I needed to build in order to find a place that I knew would be able to offer the types of things that I was looking for. And so I set out to do my research, and I started meeting with different professionals that I had met throughout my life. I started speaking with friends that were still serving, and I also spoke to women in the veteran community to ask them, like, could you see yourself being a part of an organization that is made for you, right? Structured for you and centered around the things that you need help with, and to identify what those struggles mean. And I kept hearing from other women and men, well, I don't know of anything out there that exists. And this was in 2015. So really not that long ago, right? So it really it started from a place where I was struggling, and I identified that we needed to build an organization that could offer numerous outlets, numerous activities, but also a holistic therapy approach. So a non-medicinal approach to healing.
Yeah, I love that. You saw a gap and for yourself, but then set out to create a solution, not only for yourself, but for others as well. Bridget, can you relate to that story at all as for doing something that you're doing as well?
Yeah, it's disheartening on one end and exciting on the other end, because on one end, I'm always looking to support women who have had a not so wonderful experience in the military and support them in whatever way that is. But the other thing is trying to find folks who will say it so that we can help them and give, continue to have locus of control for them so that it's an opportunity for growth and development. And so when I started WVSJ, and I'm always very honest about this. My whole thing was, I didn't know any women veteran who wanted to connect, because military sexual trauma in 2008, people didn't want to hear it. They didn't want to talk about it. And if you had the experience and you didn't want to say, open your mouth and say, I had that experience, unless you were going to the VA, and most of the women didn't want to go to the VA. So there was all of these don't want us. So the reason I started the organization was really because after a series of events of very similar things to what Stephanie had said, which were, there were veteran aligned organizations, but they were not focusing on women veteran. And then when they did accept women veteran, it was if you're doing really great and you want to be great on their picture or their brochure. So, we were behind the scenes, kind of quietly doing things because it was necessary, because women did not want to come forward and say, I've had sexual trauma, I have PTSD. for a number of reasons. Many of those reasons were, concern about losing their children, concern about, losing their employment and things of that nature. So when WVSJ set up, initially, we were just a peer support group online. And then we grew from that probably in 2010 or 11 because of service when women come marching home. I was not only a part of the documentary as a person who of interest, I also interviewed another woman who had experienced sexual trauma, was currently serving, and we were able to get her into some treatment. WVSJ had the opportunity to connect a lot of dots in the community for military women. We just didn't have like the support, the financial support to really market and get out there to let women know that we were there. And like I said, identifying was 3 to 4 years of our work was just about teaching women how to identify as a veteran. People will say, oh, that sounds crazy, but seriously, women did not know they were veteran. If you went to a woman and said, are you a veteran? They say, no, I served. Okay, but are you a veteran? No, I didn't go to combat. Are you a veteran? I mean, so we had to like teach people, you're a veteran, you served in an era. It's okay that you didn't serve in combat, like teach them the language. And then take another 3 to 6 years of teaching women how to go from, I am a veteran, and oh my God, now I have to identify other veterans so we can connect. And so our motto is identify, connect, and empower. And so, like I said, the first 6 years of the work, 6 or 7 years, was about being in every piece of media. I was at the VA, in the Make the Connection. I was in service when women come marching home. Like every single thing. I connected with Protect Our Defenders. I became a board member and started advocating on behalf of women veterans. And see, work was tangential to what we were already doing with Women Veteran Social Justice Network. We were doing the arts programs where we were doing the retreats. We were hosting half-day events where women could come and be supported in a safe space. So there were all of these things going on. And as Stephanie said, they were peer, but we were not a crisis management. Because I have PTSD and I was the CEO, and some of that stuff it was too much for me. So I had to connect the dots on the communities outside of our organization and begin to partner. And that became more of what we were doing from our advocacy piece, our social justice piece, if you will, the inclusion, making sure that women were honored at the same hero level as our male counterparts. All of that work laid the groundwork to begin to develop the next generation of leaders. Because guess what? There's 2 million plus veterans. I can't do all this work by myself. Right. And there's no way I want to. I want people like Stephanie and Jeremy to come on board and like all hands on deck, let's get this done. And so that's a little bit different from some leadership, I'm very like integrative, let's work together, let's collaborate. And so sometimes that, didn't always sit well. But we were able to really bring women forward to have their voices heard in the media, in publication, in research, and all of these different, in film and television even. So, it's been a like dig the road, pave the path, and then say, y'all come, to get these things done. So, those are some of the like bigger, connected things that WVSJ has done. But our mentoring program, one-to-one, across every spectrum, probably is the most impactful, because we don't just mentor women who've experienced sexual trauma. We mentor men who want to start nonprofits to support programs that support women veterans. So like Jason Moon and Warrior Songs, and Boone Cutler, some of his programming, and somebody's gonna get mad at me if I don't remember, but Moral Injury Support Network, like Iraq and Afghanistan Veterans of America, worked with them for some number of years. Wounded Warrior, same thing. Early on, we worked with them with their MST programming. So we've always been working. It's just like, but I prefer to work behind the scenes. And so even with our marketing, people say, I don't know that you're the CEO. Who's the CEO? Right. It's like, the women veteran are the CEOs. That's why. we're that way. We want people to look for women veteran, not for Bridget McCoy.
Yeah.
Because if everyone's
Well,
looking for me, then they're not looking to connect with women veteran, right?
right. And it's about the community and those who you're serving. And I just want to validate what the work that you're doing, because I transitioned out in 2003, and that was my experience. Nothing existed, and that was my experience. And what I shared at the beginning of this is something that I've just recently come to share, and it's been a long journey.
Yeah.
So don't mind my door opening. I forgot to turn on my light before I started this. I had to text my daughter and say, please come in quietly and turn on this light. Real life, guys, COVID.
Tech support.
I know. So Jeremy, tell me a little bit about what it's like to take on a role, a large role of an established organization, and come in under someone else's vision and make it your own. And while still serving in the reserves, wanting to get into this space head on, how has your experience been, and what kind of made you decide to take that? How did you know it was for you?
It's a good question. I didn't, is the short answer. I mean, I was lucky enough to have a very successful transition off of active duty. I was on active duty until 2005. Had a job lined up before before my last day of terminal leave. Went straight into the reserves as well, because I knew I wanted to continue serving in uniform. Had a job as a defense contractor, which was great, living in the DC area, paid well, good benefits and things like that. Was enjoying still being in uniform. But it wasn't the most fulfilling job. It was great, but it wasn't giving me that sense of fulfillment that I had on active duty. And so I found myself both volunteering for returns to active duty, as well as getting involuntarily mobilized in that time. And I both found those times to be the most rewarding, but also reconnected me with especially other reservists who were having a much more challenging time making the transition to civilian world and to civilian employment. I was seeing a lot of people taking mobilizations, not just domestic and CONUS mobilizations, but mobilizing to go to Iraq, in 2009 at the height of really combat situations, because it meant a year's steady paycheck, it meant insurance for their family and things like that. And so that was really just it was opening my eyes to what many other veterans were dealing with, and that many were not as lucky as I was to have made that transition. And so combining that with the fact that I just wasn't getting the satisfaction from the defense contracting world, was really looking to see what I could do next. Was familiar with some of the VSOs, I was familiar with IAVA, but I also, and this is kind of a lesson learned for myself that I try and pass on, I didn't really see myself as a veteran because I was still serving as a reservist. And so I never took advantage of all the things that the VSOs had to offer, especially to transitioning service members. And I wish I knew then what I knew now. I would have been talking about it a lot more. But in reaching out to different people and the mentors to say, hey, what do you think I could be looking at to do? They recommended looking to the VSO community for employment. And so that's what I did. I was connected with IAVA, started talking to them about coming on board. Really had no nonprofit experience, but they were good enough to bring me on board and just put me in a role where I was able to learn very quickly. And not surprisingly, in the VSO community, you're often under-resourced, and there's more work to do than there are people to do it. So got the opportunity to learn fundraising, learn operations, get in front of people to talk about the mission, really doing everything, and just had opportunities to advance. And yeah, it was really surprising. Because Paul Rykoff, the founder, after I'd been with the organization for about 3 years, kind of approached me and said, hey, I'm actually genuinely thinking about stepping down. And no one really believed him, because he'd said that before, and he'd been doing this for 15 plus years. But he was really serious. And so I connected with the board about me taking over. And I was very much unsure as to whether or not I could do it. I'm sure others were unsure as to anyone could do it, because it was such a personality-driven organization, I think, at the time. So much of the success came from Paul's ability to get out there and really get in front of people. And so I was very uncertain, but it was a great challenge, and I've been fortunate enough to have a very supportive board, and the collaboration that was discussed here earlier was key, I think, to me being successful. There were so many groups that were interested in partnering with us, continue to partner with us, and I think that's how not only were we able to be successful, especially during the pandemic, but how many of us, and I think how the VSO community going forward is going to be mostly successful. It really is through the collaboration. There's so many shared issues that we're dealing with. Some groups are better positioned to deal with certain issues and others are better on other issues. And when we work together and can combine firepower, I think that's when we're really the most successful. And that for me has probably been what is the single biggest factor to my success, and I think the success of the organization.
Great. Awesome. What an awesome way to kick this off. And I have so many questions, and I think that we definitely have some people watching that have questions too. So I'm going to keep an eye on some things and chime in as I can. But in the meantime, as those things are coming through, just hearing from your introductions, I feel overwhelmed, and I understand, and it feels like this nonprofit space is so complex. Whether you started the organization, coming in the organization on an established vision, and then trying to navigate that. Bridget, you talked about the first 6 years was this, and then now it's this. It just seems so complex. And the one thing that I have experienced with myself and other transitioning service members and veterans is that they want to give back. That service never leaves. And so jumping into a nonprofit, whether it's in a volunteer role or looking for that job, is very common. And so I think what we want to do tonight is really showcase the good, but also the challenges as well. So we can give the listener a real deal look into what it's like to run a nonprofit. And from my perspective, one thing that's overlooked is that you have two audiences. You have those who you serve, but they don't pay for the service. And so you have to fundraise in order to get those services paid for. And essentially what I always say is you're running two businesses in one. And the nonprofit space is one of the most underrated spaces, in my opinion, because nonprofit leaders have to do multiple jobs, and they really do have to run businesses within one business. Really, that's essentially what it comes down to. How you position your talking points to a funder is completely different than how you're talking to the people that you're serving. And it can get extremely complicated. And even more so in those early days, if anyone's interested in joining a lean and mean, small, up and coming nonprofit, it's difficult, it's challenging, and it's really difficult to please everybody. So I'm just curious from your points of view, what some of those challenges were. They can be something from the past, or they can be something now. I'll let you choose whatever's on your heart. This time I'd like to start with Bridget and have you share.
Sure. I got so enthralled in what you were saying.
You're like, yes.
Yes. So for me, so I'm going to tell something personal.
Okay.
For me, at the time that I started the nonprofit, I was considered medically fragile. I was on a walker. I had PTSD, very bad. I mean, it was very, very bad. To see the things that I was able to accomplish in that time sometimes even amazes me. But at the same time, I was struggling. And then I had women who were coming to me, and men who had experienced military sexual trauma, who also were struggling. And like you said, you have a fiduciary responsibility. The IRS says you have to do certain things a certain way. And so you have to have a board, you have to meet with the board, you have to do those established things, and you have to fundraise. And then you have to manage the operational part of like your programs, right? And so some of that stuff was very difficult. And I had to sometimes make decisions on my health to postpone treatments for myself so that I could be focused, and prepared to do things for the organization and to manage the women that were coming who had all of these, things going on. We had women who were losing their children. We had women who were homeless. I was homeless at the time I started the organization. I was in the HUD-VASH program. So there were like multiplicity of things that I, as the founder, was going through. And then on the same note, supporting other women. And so that's why we maintain that peer support, peer leader kind of framework, because I felt that it was very important that women, no matter what they decided to do, could have the support of someone else to say, I've got you, right? And then the other part was that like I said, in the beginning, many of the organizations didn't necessarily want to recognize, because they were like troubled by the term social justice, right? Let's go back to 2008. So they were troubled by that term, social justice. What does that mean? Who are you and what are you trying to do? Why are you creating an organization that's separate from the men? Don't you want to be with the men? And it was like, we'd love to be with you. We'd love to do these things together. At the same time, you have to be culturally relevant, and you have to be culturally nuanced, and you have to be willing to accept military sexual trauma survivors, and you have to not have predators in your space. And so all of those things people did not want to hear. So it was very challenging for me the first couple of years. And to be honest, there were organizations that, for lack of a better term, kind of blacklisted me and were like, we're not participating with her. She's going to cause trouble. There's going to be these problems. And I was not about problems. I was about solutions. And then I was using technology, and people thought I was batshit, because I was saying you can connect women on the internet and they will respond and they will participate, but you got to create a safe space for them. And so like I said, it took, like, I had to do this thing in iterations. It wasn't like, I'm going to get on the internet, I'm going to start doing this thing, and then everybody came and supported it. Now, in the beginning, it was that way because women supported it. They got online, they were like, oh my God, there's a place that I can go and talk about what I've been through, and people are supporting me. But beyond that, like, the financial support was really military veteran men who supported the organization. Sounds crazy again, but most of my funders at the very beginning, like a Dr. Williams and a Mr. Garcia, like different men, veteran, who were there to like kind of say, you're on the right path, just keep going, don't give up. Mentoring didn't come until much later in the process, maybe in 2017, 16 or 17, when I met Phyllis Newhouse, and she started talking with me about business and putting my business part together, because I didn't have a business part. I just had like a passion project that had a business name and had its EIN and had all the trappings, but I didn't have all of those other things. And that was the reason that I decided, when I got better, as I started getting better and better from the medical fragile perspective to being able to manage my health, because I still have, I go to the doctor 2-3 times a week for multiple things. You have to be able to manage those pieces on top of managing the organization, on top of managing the other parts of connecting the dots for your client. And so it took probably up until 2016 to really get a handle on it, because it was like riding horses and trying to like do it all at the same time, and then having limited help, and really trying to convince women. Oh my God, that was the other part. Convince women, you can do this. I promise you'll be good at it. You'll be successful. All you have to do, go out and start an organization, go out and start a project, go out and, participate in the community, but come back here where it's safe, because you're going to need somebody to support you at the end of the day, so that you don't feel despondent because maybe you hit a couple of bumps, or you experience areas where you're not as strong as you thought you were yet, so
Yeah.
all of that together, it was tiring, and I had to a couple of times take a sabbatical and just say, I need 30-40 days to just like figure it out.
Yeah.
But we also had our retreats, and those, alongside of those sabbaticals and the women coming together and being peers, like the community, like I joke about, like, I'm not the founder, I'm not only the founder, but I'm also a client, because many of the women that come into the organization also support me emotionally and physically, beyond just being a part of the organization. So
Yeah, what I'm hearing you say is so key of we're not going to solve it all today. So we need to run the marathon. And all too often within the nonprofit space, our mission is we're going to do this. But then when we start talking to funders, because we have two audiences, we realize they don't understand the problem. And so sometimes you have to spend years educating the funder, and meanwhile the people are still suffering, and it's a really hard place. It's a lot of weight to carry on your shoulders. It's really great to hear that you've learned to take care of yourself, because that's, burnout is very real in a lot of industries, but it's really big within this space of VSOs and the nonprofit space in particularly. Jeremy, what challenges are you facing today or have in the past? I'll allow you to choose.
Yeah, no, it's kind of a overlap of the two. I mean, because so much of what we do is advocacy. That's the thing we're most known for. We do have a program called the Quick Reaction Force, formerly known as the Rapid Response Referral Program, which provides direct services and support to veterans and family members for any needs that they might have. But the biggest thing that we do is advocacy, which means spending a lot of time on Capitol Hill, spending a lot of time talking to members of Congress, convincing them not only that an issue exists, but that it's one that we need them to take action on to solve. We have to work with the VA. So all of that is to say it's a slow process. There is almost nothing about the work that is fast. And so when the pandemic hit, I was really concerned, especially as it was, basically the start of my second year as the CEO. I'm like, oh boy, this could be the end of the organization because I just don't know how we're going to do this in a pandemic. But things really actually turned out relatively well in the fact that we were able to make the adjustment. Congress made an adjustment. So much went online that we actually had probably one of our most successful years ever. And some of that was because there was such need. Congress moved quickly to do things like help student veterans with the GI Bill to make sure that when their classes went online as opposed to in person, they didn't lose their housing allowance. Because of no fault of their own, based on how the VA works, if you're in an online course, vice an in-seat course, you don't get the housing allowance. And that obviously would have been incredibly detrimental to so many student veterans. And so we worked with Congress, other VSOs as well. I don't want to take all the credit for it, but Congress moved very quickly on that. But we also saw a lot of action last year on legislation from toxic exposure to women's support, mental health care, lots of progress last year, even though it was not only a pandemic, but an election year, split Congress, all of those types of things. But again, being in the nonprofit space, it also comes back to fundraising, and it can be very challenging to help funders understand how that process works because, I think funders, they're altruistic, they want to help, but they also want to see results. And it's hard to explain to them that we're going to work on this, but a result might not come for 4 years. We've been working on legislation that it might not happen, or it might take 6 years, or it might take a year. We don't know. And even when it does happen, we're not going to be able to put, funder so-and-so's name on the bill to say you helped fund this and make it happen. So it's a very challenging space to fundraise in. But I think when you do get someone that understands it and is supportive of it, they're in it for the long haul, which is incredibly helpful because it really is kind of a long haul mission that we're in.
Yeah. Yes, the marathon. And Stephanie, I'm sure you're nodding your head and you can relate to all of these challenges. And so if I'm assuming there's a lot of overlap. And so I'd like to ask you an additional question of really, how are you balancing all of this? And then if you have any other challenges that you'd like to add to the conversation, I'd love to give you an opportunity to, but really opening up that balance mindset of, how are you avoiding burnout and how are you making time for yourself when, if I had to guess, all of us are probably not the most patient people. If I had to guess, that we can maybe want to get in there. I'm like a bull in a china shop. So I like to kind of get in there and kick down doors, or at least that's how I was in the beginning. And I had to learn, oh, that's not how we do things here. Can you relate to that at all, Stephanie?
I can. And I love that you described it that way because you are on point. But I would, and suffice to say, just from listening, to Jeremy and Bridget, that this is a space where you get so much thrown at you all at once that it's hard to decipher, but you have to, right? You have to adapt. And that's what we do, especially with the backgrounds that we have. We adapt and we overcome. Burnout, I don't know that there's ever not going to be a time when you feel that way. But we chose to be in this space, and we chose to be in this space for a reason, right? To take action and to make sure that we move the needle forward when we wanted to see the change that we didn't see was taking place, or we wanted to build upon something we knew we could amplify and make greater. The challenges come on a daily basis. I think it's just understanding how to manage those challenges. But what I can tell you has truly helped me navigate the ups and downs or the intricacies of a nonprofit world is your team. Without the team, and I reiterate this over and over again, without your team, your mission does not move forward. And so I like to credit the team every day for just assisting me and being able to not just lead an organization, but to hold me accountable, right? Stephanie, you are going in 1,000,001 directions. We're going to need you to sit it out today. We'll man the helm, right? No pun intended for us Navy veterans. But you know, it's that kind of a world that we're in, and it doesn't change. It's forever. It doesn't slow down, I guess what I really need to say. It's forever evolving. And because it's forever evolving, there's so much that we need to focus on all at once. And so the advice that I normally like to give people that come into the nonprofit world is to assimilate a team that you know is going to help you take control of what it is that you're working towards, because it will shift. We saw this obviously with COVID. That comes up a lot now. How did you adapt with COVID? I mean, it forces you in a direction that you didn't know that you had to go, but it's either fight or flight in this instance. And we had to fight our way and push our way through what COVID unpredictably gave to us. And so without going down the rabbit hole of what it means to face all these challenges, you know, the one thing that I stay true to is just, you know, building a great team and continuing to build on that great team, and continuing to align yourself with organizations that are going to help you accomplish your goals. And it's like we've said on this panel since the beginning, you cannot do this alone, right? What's that saying that we hear pretty often? If you want to,
You go together.
yes, exactly. And that's true. I mean, you have to. You really have to align yourself with great organizations that share the mindset or that can help you build your organization as well. Don't be afraid to say, I really could get someone to help me in this area, or social media is my Achilles heel. You know, can somebody help me in this area? So I think that that's another thing that we need to do is understand how to delegate.
Yeah.
Within the organization.
Being aware of our strengths and areas of growth is key at any position, at any organization, but this one in particular for sure, because there's just so much to do and not enough time. And sometimes we can go down the rabbit hole of trying to figure it out, and we realize, well, we don't have time to figure it out. Someone else must know how to do this. So that took me a long time trying to figure that out, which brings me to my next question. And I'm going to start with Stephanie. And I'd like to get a little bit more personal and really dig into what your expectation was going into this versus your reality now, and how those may differ or if they're the same. And what I mean by that is mainly let's focus on like the day-to-day, because I think that there's a lot of glorified ideas and expectations of what it looks like to run an organization. And what we're looking for the audience today is a more of an inside look into the day-to-day. So they really understand what they're getting into. I know advocating on the Hill is amazing and everybody wants to do that, but is that your daily day to day? Maybe for some, may not be for all, but for your perspective, Stephanie, where does that land for you?
Thank you. That is a very good question. I can tell you that it varies, right? Depending on what it is that you're doing, but there's nothing glamorous about running a nonprofit business. I feel like there's a number of pros and cons that come with it, but I can tell you that going into this, I had not realized how much work I needed to invest, how many long hours I needed to spend, and not just in building the organization, but really building a thorough understanding of what it is you needed to do to make it successful. I spent so many days and so many hours. There's so many sacrifices that we make, and I believe we continue to make on a daily basis, because again, like I mentioned earlier, it just varies from day to day. You know,
Mhm.
what are those needs day to day? What will those participants that come through the organization need? And how do we foster an environment that shows that we continue to grow and understand what those needs are, since they do shift? Especially because you're not just dealing with one generation of veterans, you're dealing with all generations of veterans. And I think it's very important to understand that when you are investing in building a nonprofit, that there's going to have to be goals that you set for yourself, especially because there's so much work that needs to be done, and it's not work that you can do alone, but that you set some realistic expectations in terms of time. And if you don't, and you just shelve things or you let things go off to the wayside, there's a high chance that your organization will not succeed. And I don't say this to deter anybody. I think when we talk about reality and the reality of building a nonprofit business, you have research studies that indicate you will make it within X amount of years' time or you won't. And really, that is dependent on the amount of work that you put into that organization. But it's not you that has to do the work alone, right? It's you being able to build a team that's going to help you put in those man hours to really do the work that needs to be done. And because there's varying degrees of things that need to be done, so working in the advocacy space, working in the mental health space, working in the holistic therapy space, and not only that, but taking on, you know, certain responsibilities of being present to speak to people and helping them understand what your organization's goals are and what your needs are. And then, like we spoke about earlier, also reaching those participants. And so you're speaking multiple languages, right? I feel like in a way, you've got to learn multiple languages in the world of nonprofit. There's a language for your sponsor, the language for your partnerships, and then the language for your participants or your clients or your members, however you identify them.
Yeah,
So
that's a great way to
you know, my
put it.
trial and error.
Yeah,
Yes.
love that
but
analogy.
I can tell you trial and error.
I love that analogy. And some languages are easier than others, depending
Yes.
on your experience.
Yes, they are. That is for certain.
Yeah, super great analogy. First of
Yes.
all, I wanted to just pause. My brain goes to Bridget, and it's Bridget. Bridget, please
It's
clarify.
think of it like a bridge and a jet. If you think
Bridget.
of it those two ways, you'll never get it wrong.
I don't ever want to get that wrong again. So I just wanted
It's
to
okay.
pause and clarify and apologize for that, because
problem.
no
Thank
one
you.
wants to be misrepresented. But for my next question, actually, similar question: expectation versus reality around community building. Because you have such a large community, you talked about peer-to-peer support, and I'm just curious what that expectation was versus the reality of community. Because we all know everything that we're doing in the nonprofit space, nothing works without community. So I
Yeah.
think I'd love to hear more about that.
I think that's our biggest commodity. I think a lot of times when I'm talking, people are like, "Oh, where's your building? Where's your this?" I'm like, it's our women vets. That's our commodity. It's our community that supports us. So where it started, like I said, was just this, scrappy community that I thought was going to be 10 or 15 women that like kind of connected with me and I connected with them. And it burgeoned within a 90-day, 120-day period from just 10 or 15 people to 80. And then again, I doubled and then it tripled. And then I said, well, it might be better to like make this open page so maybe other people can get involved. And so then we did that, and it doubled, it tripled, it quadrupled in a very short amount of time. And so I need to give you guys a backstory to that part, because initially the WVSJ started as a graduate, a project-based concept, which was a third part of a complete program that was based on artificial intelligence and virtual space learning. So the space that we created on Facebook was really supposed to be a experiential kind of discussion space where people could talk about their challenges and da da da. And it just kind of, like I said, blew out from there into this other thing. So we've been fortunate. Like, we just got a website. People don't believe that. Like honestly, a lot of the work that I did was just by people reaching out to me on Twitter and people reaching out to me on Facebook and LinkedIn. I was probably one of the early adopters when it came to LinkedIn. And so I got on there pretty quickly. And so I was a subject matter expert from that perspective. And so that gave me credibility in the community and gave me community, like I'm in community spaces that people are like, how did you get in that space? Like I'm in with survivors, but I'm also in with spouses, and I'm also in with male combat, and I'm also in with the artists and the military experience piece, and, you know, actors and writers. And so all of those connections gave me an opportunity to kind of go in and say, hey, did you know this about women veteran? And begin to educate the community. And so that community building was like, again, people knew I had street cred. They were like, well, she came in here talking about MST. And so she's not going anywhere. So we've opened it up now. And yes, now people have come to me and said they've had that experience. So now I'm looking at you differently than I was before. And so that gave me an opportunity to build momentum. And that momentum translated to the opportunities to go before Congress on a fairly regular basis. I can pretty much go into many states and talk to pretty much any of the congressmen and women and say, hey, or I have a peer that I can go to and say, hey, can you, when you go to talk to your congresswoman or man, can you talk to them about this topic? Because it's very important and it's something that they've missed. And so I lean very heavily on the collaborative framework of like, I don't know everything and I don't want to know everything. I want to be able to hand it off to Stephanie or to hand it off to Jeremy, because I don't want to be the one in the room all the time doing everything. I want to have my peers there with me or for me and be able to depend on them, because I am not going to always have the wherewithal to do everything. And so that has, again, created this level of credibility, because I will hand something off in a minute, even if it's something I'm qualified to do, because I want to give other people the opportunity to be in that space, to develop their skills, to understand what it actually takes to do this type of work. So, you know, so when you talk about community building, like that's it. I'm always like matching people together. Do you know this person? Have you met this person? Can you get to talk to this person? You know, do you want to do something? One of the big things that people tease me about is they're like, I always feel like your hand's in my back trying to get me to do something. And, you know, like maybe it is, because I'm always wanting to include people in the process, women veteran, in the process as primary, and then secondary to bring the other community around in support of, or in development with women veteran. And so all of those things have just, you know, made it such a grassroots situation. When I tell people that our Facebook page, you know, we don't sell anything, we don't do any of that stuff, and we have like millions of people responding and followers and connected, 50 connected groups and all this stuff, people are like, they don't believe me. I have to like screenshot and send it to them and say, you know, I might not be using it effectively, but this is our community. And it ranges across the ages. We don't just have, you know, women veteran of like 45 to 60. We have male veteran, 45, 60, 65, 70 on our pages, communicating with us, responding to Vietnam era Marine the other day sent a message and said, you know, I want to help. How can I help? I've been following the page. I've had combat veteran, Iraq veterans come to our page, male, and say, the information, I know this stuff is for women. I say, no, it's not. We have a focus on women, but this information you can use about PTSD, about different resources, how to get involved, get your education, just different things like that. And so from that perspective, I feel like that's our superpower. Like all the other stuff I don't get into, but I feel like if we need to get a message out to a deep network and a broad network, we can do that part. And sometimes that's all that our community needs, is just that, you know, and that's been where we've been the most useful. We do support women in crisis and things like that, but when people reach out to us, it's after they've bumped into other communities and they didn't get any support. And someone said, maybe try WVSJ and see if they can point you in the right direction. So
thank you for that. I appreciate it. It sounds like a lot of work, and it takes time, you know, time takes time. I think we're all, not only we're all impatient, but the world we live in today is so instant gratification. And I think that's a huge misconception with being an entrepreneur or anybody innovating anything. We want it now. So Jeremy, last but not least, what is the expectation versus the reality in advocacy and on the Hill, and patience, I'm assuming, is about to come out of your mouth, but I'm excited to hear. I am so thankful for you.
Thank you. No, patience is a big part of it, but I think it does go back to a lot of what's been discussed here. It's having a great team and empowering them to do the work that maybe you came into the role thinking that you were going to get to do, because some of that's the glamorous role. It's, oh, I want to testify in front of Congress. I want to be the one sitting across from the member of Congress telling him or her what needs to happen. But the reality is, if you're spending all your time executing the mission, then no one is really thinking about what needs to happen in the next year, the 2 years, the way you grow the organization and things like that. And that's what I think the CEO, the executive director, whatever the leadership person is, that's where they really need to be focusing as much of their time as possible. And I think you do that by empowering your team, hiring a team that is qualified, and to Bridget's point, pushing them to then do more. And I think that's key. I think everyone that's in a nonprofit is there because they want to help, they want to do good. But we need them often to do more, and there's opportunities for them to do more. And I think the more that you can push people that are interested, you don't get into the nonprofit world to make a whole lot of money, but you can do a lot of good. And the best way to do that, I think, is empowering people to give them the opportunities. And so that's been maybe the biggest change for me, is realizing that there were things that I thought I would be doing, but then there are the things that I actually need to be doing. And usually the things that I need to be doing are the ones that are not going to be making the headlines, or not going to be passing the legislation. There's other people within our team that can do that often better than I can, because they can dedicate the time and bandwidth to being really good about that. But only I can, not only I, meaning me personally, but as the leadership, you're the one that can really start thinking and crafting what is our longer term strategy for growing the organization, for increasing our effectiveness, for bringing more people on board, for partnering with other groups. You really need to be doing that, and you need to let other people grow into places where they can really be doing the day-to-day hands-on work of the organization.
Yeah. I think we are coming close to the end of our time together, which makes me very sad. But, I just wanted to, I've been jotting down some common themes as we've been going, and I kind of want to bring it full circle for the audience. And the things that kept coming up over and over is building something that didn't exist before, leadership, delegation, innovation, patience. Time takes time. We're running a marathon. And we're not serving just our generation of veterans, and focus is very necessary. Through the Minority Veterans of America Economic Empowerment Initiative, what I see with all of you is that nonprofit sector is a real option for veterans. It's a real option. Someone can create their own way, or they can come into an established organization, but it is not without challenges. And I'm really, really grateful for you guys being here this evening and sharing those challenges, because that's the real deal of what people are getting into. And that's what we need to hear, so people can determine if this path is for them. I want to leave the audience with just one quick snippet from each of you. And I'd love for you to just share just a very brief piece of advice that you would give to any transitioning service member that is really interested in joining the nonprofit space, or maybe starting their own nonprofit. What would you tell them today, based off of your experience and what you've learned thus far? What would you share with them? And I'd love to start with Stephanie.
Thank you. I would love for the audience to walk away empowered, and to know that, yes, it may take hard work, but it's really simple. Don't give up. If you have a vision, no one will ever know what that vision is like if you don't bring it to fruition. Ask questions. Align yourself with mentors that you know have your best interest and will help guide you. I don't think that anybody should fear coming into the nonprofit world. As you can see, it's given us a real big opportunity to make change. And so if you have a passion for change, don't let anything stop you.
That's great. Great advice. I love that. Passion for change. And Jeremy?
I'd say get involved early. As I mentioned it in the beginning, I regret not getting involved in veteran organizations. Really, frankly, while I was still on active duty, I think they would go a long way to helping veterans or service members transition into the veteran world. And if you're interested in getting involved in the veteran organizations, and especially if you're thinking about starting one, I think that's all the more important to get out there and try out as many different veteran organizations as possible. There's a lot out there doing a lot of good work. And I think sometimes we overlook the fact that there might be an organization out there that's trying to do that. Maybe you get involved with them, find out what's working, what's not working, and see if there's maybe a way that you can empower that organization before branching out on your own, because it's not to say that there's not still need, but it's an increasingly crowded space, and we tend to find we're all kind of working with the same groups, and the more we can come together, the better.
Yeah, great advice. Love that. All right, and Bridget.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me here. And I really, Stephanie and Jeremy hit a bunch of things that, yeah, I agree with, especially mentoring, and especially getting involved before you get out of the military, if you can. I think there's a program called DoD Skill Bridge or something like that. And so I'm always, I'm on Veterati if somebody wants to reach out to me for mentoring, but I'm always telling mentees to begin the process to looking at other organizations and donating your IP, your intellectual property, your mind, your thoughts, and everything into an organization, and taking the time to get mentored. I think that that's very important because it helps you to align what the direction is. Try multiple things. I mean, it's okay to try, going into a VSO organization, and then, a Horses for Heroes organization, and then a music, try them all, because you never know what your actual niche is. And don't just take an opportunity to do something that you already always done. Take an opportunity to try something new with a new group of people that you may actually be much more aligned with your value system than what you perceive. So those are just a few of the things that I would say. And definitely reach out to wvsjnetwork.org, because we could definitely utilize your skills, knowledge, and ability with our organization. So thank you.
Thank you. What a wonderful panel, and so much great advice. I love all of that advice. Is super solid, and that's been my experience too in my transition. And over the years, I really kind of dibbled and dabbled and have found my way. It's taken me over a decade to find my way, but here I am, and no one needs to know any different. The reality is that time takes time. And depending on what age and what part of your life you're transitioning out, it's going to look different from everybody else. So my biggest advice is always don't compare yourself to others. Do what makes your heart and your soul sing, and everything else will fall into place. And with that, I think we are all set for the evening. And thank you so much. All right. And we have a quick question I want to address. Who do I contact? I need mentoring. I would reach out to veterati.com. And I would look for mentors on Veterati. I had to assume a lot of the people here are on Veterati, and you can find others that you can have access to. Build your profile and get started. You're very welcome. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.